It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour. I'm excited to be here with you today on episode 30 of the Breaking Average podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you today, my friend?
Doing good. I'm doing great. I'm looking at the pics behind you. You got a whole new background. You got Lincoln. I'm not sure who that other person is, but
what?
Pretty cool.
Come on, man. That's the Lombardi guy. Vince Lombardi.
Oh,
winning
Vince.
Is everything, right?
Oh, Vince Lombardi. I didn't recognize him with his hair.
Yeah,
He's got that side profile.
It's probably not a great picture.
No, that's great. It's good. So yeah. So we're having fun today, guys. We are exploring the ownership factor. We are on part 3. We're going to dive in deeper, and joining us on our discussion is Rick. So Rick, welcome.
Welcome. Hey, everybody. Let's get cranking.
Yeah, Rick, great to see you. Paul, you mentioned the pictures on my wall. You know, I just had a big move. I sold my house, moved into a new office space, and so I've got before I had a wall painted green in my old place. So I always had a green screen. Here I don't. And, I actually bought a green screen. It didn't work out too well because it was too small for the camera to pick up. So I'm using these images here, and I've had these images in my office for a while. I love Lincoln just because of the whole idea. I think next week we're going to talk about resilience. This is an image about perseverance by Lincoln. So I may pull some ideas from this image just for that discussion on resilience. But today we're talking about the third element of ownership. And I bet you I'll pull some things from Vince Lombardi when I talk about ownership today and the whole idea of implementation. So I'm really excited about getting into that in our conversation today, Paul. One of the things we really like to do is kind of jump into a story before we get cranking. You write great stories in the book Breaking Average: 7 Critical Factors for Team Stroke Leadership. Why don't you get us started about around a story of ownership and implementation today?
Yeah, I wanted to share kind of a fresh story. I know folks have read the book, and there's some good stories in there. And but there's another story that I didn't put in that book, but that I love. Have you guys ever seen the movie Stand and Deliver?
Oh yeah,
I have not.
Oh man, it's so good. It may have been one of those movies that I had sitting on the side in our movie madness that we did last year. It didn't make the top 16, but it's definitely in my top 32. It's Stand and Deliver. There's a great actor, Edward James Olmos. You may be familiar with him. He played, I forget the character in Miami Vice, but he's well known for that, and Battlestar Galactica and other movies. Fantastic actor. And he plays the real life story of Jaime Escalante. And Jaime Escalante is a computer science guy. He's working at some big, I don't know if it was IBM or Intel or wherever he was working at that time. And he decides to leave the cushy computer science job, and he wants to help high school students. He's going to teach computers there. He's like, wow, there's an opportunity. So he goes to an East LA high school, I forget the name of it, and he walks in day one, and the principal says, welcome. I wasn't sure you're going to come. A lot of teachers say they're going to come and they don't. You're here. Welcome. Sorry, we couldn't afford the computers. You're teaching math. She was like, well, okay, all right. Teaching math. Well, I know math, so we'll go in there. He walks in. There's a bunch of kids. They don't want to be there. It's math, And he learns pretty quick that they don't have a passion for math. There's no motivation for math. There's no interest in math. And they're not good at math at all. Their skill set's pretty poor. But he just stays with them and encourages them. And despite, really the challenge, the resistance that's there, and we're going to be talking about resistance in a future podcast. But despite that, he just hangs in there. He teaches them math. In fact, not only that, he says, guys, do you know that if you learn this math, you can get college credit if you take this exam, and you'll be able to go far with this AP exam if you take that and you pass that. And they're like, what? We can get college credit, sir? And he goes, yes, you can. So he teaches them calculus. He gets everyone in his class, takes them through kind of a summer school, teaches them about this idea of ganas, right? Which is Spanish for desire, this mindset. And it's really powerful. It's got a great soundtrack, by the way. I love the Mr. Mr. song, Stand and Deliver, after the namesake of the movie. Here's the story. I'm giving some spoilers away. The kids take the exam. Every one of them passes. But the problem is that the educational testing services feel like, no way, they shouldn't have passed at all. They all cheated. There's too many similar mistakes that they all made. They must have looked at each other. They cheated. So it just takes all the air out. They're deflated. They're just ready to quit. Escalante says, don't give up. He fights for them just like a good guy does. He said, what if they take the test again? He said, okay, but they have to take it tomorrow. So without any, quick cramming or anything like that, they go and take the test. Every one of them passes the AP Calc the second time. And it's just a feel-good moment. I love the end of it because they got the scrolling credits. You can see that not only did he do it that year, he did it every year after. I mean, he's like teacher of the year. Fantastic. It's a great story. It just got me motivated, and I needed it back in the day because I was taking some really tough math classes, and that inspired me to get through what I needed to get through in my engineering school. So, but I love that because it's about ownership. It's about ownership because Jaime Escalante, he takes ownership of the situation, but he also gives ownership to those students and allows them to take ownership of their lives because they hadn't before. They were just following the script that everybody else had given. He helps them flip the script, take ownership of that new script, and they get college credit for what they're doing. And many of them did very, very well. So it's just a great story. That's the story I wanted to start off with today.
Well, maybe I'll have to watch the movie, but I'm not a math fan. You know the books like So-and-So for Dummies? I needed that Math for Dummies book in high school. I would have done much better if they'd have had a book like that in school because I'm a horrible math student. Maybe I needed Escalante to teach me along the way. It reminds me, Paul, that story reminds me a little bit. I cannot rename, and I know Rick will know this. We'll bring him in to share. What's the name of the movie where Kevin Costner was the track coach? Was it Highland or something like that? Y'all remember that movie?
McFarlane.
It's relatively new. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, McFarlane. Rick, you got to see that movie, man. It is fantastic. Paul, have you seen that?
Oh yeah, it's good.
It's really a fantastic movie, but it's not about math. It's about track. But, Costner had gotten fired as a football coach, and then he gets sent off to this, this school where, it's for nobody, right? It's poverty. And anyway, he takes these kids that all they do is work in the fields during, for their parents. And he takes them and turns them into, track champions in the state of California. It's a fantastic movie, but it's about ownership as well. He had to own the role as a track coach when he wanted to be a football coach. He had to own the responsibility of leadership in a place he didn't want to be. You just reminded me of that movie, Paul, when you were talking through that. Rick, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing good. Now you've got me thinking for Love of the Game, which is one of my favorite Costner movies, right? The baseball. You ever see that one? Beautifully done. Beautifully done. Yeah. So now we're onto a whole new movie trend. Now we'll debate the greatest Kevin Costner movies of all time. That's where we're headed.
Well, you know what we should do? I watched a great movie recently. My favorite actor really is Denzel Washington because I just think he's so talented. He can do so many different things. But I watched a movie recently with him in it. Golly, I can't even think of the name of it, but he was like a kind of a rogue CIA agent, and they were trying to kill him. It was pretty cool. But maybe we should do that, Rick. We could come at, we've done these movies, but we could do best sports movies, best Costner movies, best Denzel Washington movies, and maybe I wouldn't get cheated this time in the championship.
We could do it by actor, right? Because we laughed about how many Tom Hanks movies were in our leadership ones. Like that's the ultimate pinnacle. We could do a top 32 Tom Hanks movies.
Yeah, there you go. That could be good. We're getting way off topic here today, but that's what we do sometimes. Rick, we're talking about ownership, man. Why don't you bring us back to where we want to go today?
Yeah, ownership. We went through define the opportunities and empower team members, and today we're talking about implementation, kind of one of my core topics. Almost what I do for a living, and I always search for those inspirational posts to get us started. And I didn't even have to search for this one. And I'm borrowing from Paul, who went with obscure references. I believe he quoted Tina Yothers the last time. So I'm going to go with "Do or Do Not." There is no try by Yoda for this one. I mean, come on, you either do it or you don't. There's no trying about this. If we're going to implement, let's implement. Let's go.
Yeah, my favorite actor right there. Talking about actors, it's Yoda. Absolutely.
Frank Oz.
That's good. That's good. Do or do not. Well, we want to help you do more. We want to help you break average. We'd love for you to visit our website, breakingaveragepodcast.com. We know there's some great leaders out there that are great implementers and great owners of their responsibility of leadership. We're looking for leaders that we can interview. So breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. If you know somebody we should interview, we should learn more about, please go give us their information on our website. We'll do the rest from there. But breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader.
Yeah, and fantastic. And I always like highlighting our sponsor too. And Rick, we've got a pretty cool sponsor today, don't we?
Yeah, and he's making me say all this, so it's really I'm nervous because if I don't do it well or right, then when we stop recording, there's going to be a typical chastising that happens of the little brother. No, I'm just teasing. Today's Mike Harbor and Harbor Resources. Obviously, Mike is somebody that's near and dear to both of us, Paul, and I know that you actually were coached, privately by Mike as well, and you've spoke a lot about that, and we can't let your performance shade any of the clients who would want to hire Mike because, and now that's the end of my ribbing of both of you, but honestly, Mike does a fantastic job, even. As he privately, just encourages me and coaches me on certain things. He's got a way of I couldn't think of anybody better on implement because I can literally hear him shouting that Yoda quote. Behind the scenes, I was having internet issues this morning and didn't know if I was going to make the podcast. And Mike was like, "You're going to do it. Let's just go. It's happening. Keep trying. Figure it out." But if it doesn't matter what issue you're having or what you're experiencing in your life, you need somebody who can speak into you. You need somebody who can help you be accountable. You need somebody who can help coach you to success. And I could think of nobody else better than Mike. And he's got a fantastic planner that came out. Basically, it's his way of looking at things and things that's helped him in his personal life. And he's sharing that with the world. And you can go find that at mikeharbor.net. And we thank Harbor Resources for being our sponsor today.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate that. And, just for our listeners, Rick, he gives me a hard time. We give each other a hard time, but he's not lying. I mean, literally this morning, they were 30 seconds late to the podcast. And I was texting him, are we going to be on time today?
Are we doing this today, guys? I'm here. Right. And you're not ready. Yeah. Let's go.
That's right. So Rick's not lying. I am, I am type A. I'm, I admit it. I like to be on time. And, I learned in the military, Rick, that if you're 15 minutes early, you're late. And so, I've always been able to carry that forward. And it, it could be the difference in life and death sometimes, right? That's what ownership is all about. In the military, if you're 15 minutes late on mission, right, it could be life or death. Now, in the real world, it's not always that way, but it could be. I work a lot in healthcare, and sometimes it could be life and death if you're just a little bit off. When that neurosurgeon's doing brain surgery on me, I want him to cut the right place, right? Don't leave me messed up. So that's really what we're talking about is ownership. And I love this portion of the book. I was blessed by Paul Gustafson, who is the author of Breaking Average, to invite me in as a kind of a co-author in this book, but more importantly, this chapter And because I think it is so important. When we think about ownership, we need a lot more of it in the world right now. I talked about this a little bit, I think a week or two ago when we jumped into this topic. We need our leaders of the world to quit pointing fingers at each other and just own the problems that we have and start solving them. Quit blaming each other. Let's just start solving them for at least Americans. And then, maybe we could help around the world too. No one wants to listen to leaders who can't solve their own problems in their own life or their own country as well. So let's really jump into what this idea of ownership means and why it's important. Rick, let's get started with you. What is ownership? Why is it important? And let's tie in the whole idea of implementation today, because I know you're great at that in your project management work that you do.
Yeah. Before I jump into implementation, though, just the comment that you made around, blaming each other and pointing the finger, I think what's happening in the world more than anything is we're taking very, very complex issues and we're creating simplified arguments to fire up a base to get, whatever it is that they want. And we've got to stop simplifying the arguments, because the things aren't that simple. When they talk gun control, they're basically saying, one thing or another. You talk about some of these big issues and it becomes these one-liners on either side that are simplified, that are like the worst, but it's so gray that there's a lot of discussion. It's very complex. It can't be just on or off. This isn't a computer where it's a 1 or a 0. And I think that the ownership needs to come into the discussion and understanding that they're complex issues and stop allowing these kind of one-liners to drive. When we start talking about implementation, though, this is where the rubber meets the road. Even we define the opportunities, we created a vision, we've empowered the team. That's really kind of the first, 20 days of a 2-year project, right? I mean, implementation is the rest of that. And one of my favorite sayings, though, is 90 or the first 98% of doing a project takes 2% of your effort. The last 2% takes 98% of your effort. And the reason being is the trying to get it across the finish line is one of the hardest things that most people do. And so implementation is where the rubber meets the road. But you've got to get to the point where you're doing the work. And I'm going to switch a little bit this, instead of normally talking about project management, but a lot of entrepreneurs listen to our show, and a lot of people who are wanting to start a business listen to our show. And there's this entrepreneur's journey, right? You've defined your product or your vision, and you're ready to go. You've empowered the team, right? You've got people on social media and internet. Maybe you did some recordings, all the other stuff. And now you've actually pressed the button. It's time to implement, right? And every entrepreneur, when you've gone through this, I've done it, I know before too, you hit the button and you're just waiting for the register to ring and for it to take off, and it doesn't. That's actually where implementation starts. Because up until then, you were just basically bringing your vision to fruition, right? That you brought your vision to the point that it's real, but the solution itself is not implemented. And one of the things that we talk about often, Paul, is agile. And I love agile because it took this idea and really ran with that in the fact of iterations. So if you think about implementing a solution, a long time ago in software, and even a lot of businesses look at this as that there's this one big push. I always use Microsoft Word as my example. Do you know how many features are in Microsoft Word? I guarantee you probably less than 5% of the features are used 98% of the time. So why are there so many features? Well, back in the day, we used to think of possibly everything that somebody would need, and we developed that. And that's why it takes 2, 3, 4 years sometimes to develop software. This agile methodology says, you know what, we're going to come up with what we call an MVP. And that's been highlighted in the book before as well. But the MVP is that minimally viable product, which says, let's get the basic features of why they would use a document creation software. Let's get that done and out, and then let the market drive the solution. Right? Well, when we're doing any kind of project, we need to think in the same way. Once we press the button to implement, that's just the beginning of that implementation cycle. It's basically saying, here's a rough draft of my vision. Now we've really got to implement the solution, and the real work starts. So the difference between these entrepreneurs that you see are highly successful and people that are entrepreneurs is that once that first idea has been started, they actually had to go implement the solution and find out why people weren't buying, or why people weren't doing this, or what they needed to tweak in order to make it the right solution to go forward.
Yeah, that's good. Rick, you hit me below the belt a few times on that, because you were talking to me. You know, when you talk about entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. The three of us are entrepreneurs here. And, you know, it's not enough to have the vision, right? It's got to happen. You got to implement it. And I've had some challenges in my own life, my own business, where, you know, I waited for it to happen. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Paul, what about your thoughts on implementation, ownership implementation, what it is, why it's important?
Yeah, and I love that concept of the entrepreneur's journey. I think that's so important, and I'm glad you brought that up, Rick, because we're all on that journey. And you look back, you know, I told the story of Stand and Deliver, Jaime Escalante. You know, let's just unpack that just for a quick second, because Escalante, he did all three elements that we talk about as far as ownership, right? He defined the opportunities, all right? He empowered the team. He empowered each of those students. They weren't empowered before. In fact, they didn't know what that meant. It took them, like, they had to swallow that one. He empowered them. And then that's not enough, because you can empower, but if you don't implement, then you're going to take the air out of the sail, right? So he implemented solutions. He had them implement solutions as well. So you get everybody involved in that. And you think about that. The entrepreneur's journey is about that point. I love the 98.2% thing that Rick talked about. There really is that focus. We've got to put our nose to the grindstone and get going on this thing. Think about the mission. The mission matters. We're going to implement the mission. The leader is the guide. The team is the hero, right? So if you follow that, the Joseph Campbell kind of mentality in terms of how we lead, then we see everybody else as the heroes and we're the guide, which is really powerful. I look at Ulbrichtsen, right? We talked about Coach Ulbrichtsen, same scenario. Defined the opportunities, empowered the team, implemented the solutions. The team did. Escalante, Truett and Dan Cathy, Chick-fil-A. Sarah Blakely, I was hearing about her story in terms of the impact that she made with, was it Spanx or what?
Spanx,
she's
yep.
like, unbelievable, right? These stories, you can unpack any of these stories and you'll see all three of these elements. But that third one, if you don't get to implement solutions, it's a fail. But if you implement solutions, even if you fail in the process of implementing the solutions, you're going to learn from it. You'll get better. You'll improve. You know, you'll make the Chick-fil-A sandwich better. You'll make, you know, the Tesla vehicles actually work really well. You know, some of these stories are interesting because they all kind of rooted in struggles and challenges. But when they implement and they learn and they get better at it and they keep improving, that's important. Wilbur Ross, there's a quote, he says, it's important to have a sound idea, yes, but the really important thing is the implementation. And I think that's so true. And Mike, you've got a lot of great tips on ownership. I would love for you to share some of those things, because you know, we're highlighting you as a sponsor. So just for a minute, man, pretend this is a coaching session with all our viewers. And give everybody some ownership tips and tricks here, if you could.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you
I love that. Before I go, though, you know, I can't miss this opportunity. Rick, did you hear how Paul acted like he wasn't sure who Sarah Blakely was?
Yeah.
You know, he's got his Spanx on, but he acted like he wasn't sure. Yeah, he knew that she created. He's wearing those Spanx right now, I bet. I couldn't pass that up, Paul. I'm usually giving Rick a hard time, but I had to give you a hard time this morning.
I don't think they call them Spanx. I heard they call them, there's a different name for the menswear. What is it?
You would know, Paul. Mike and I don't know. You know, Paul.
I didn't even know they made menswear. I'm serious.
I didn't know they did either, but I heard the story like, wow. She learns to pivot, implementing new ideas. Isn't she
like the first self-made like billionaire?
I think so, but she was.
Female billionaire, not. I think I heard that or read that recently. I need to go look at that, because really admire her story, man. Because it's truly a self-made, ground up, struggling to get to where she was, taking an idea and just really, owning it. Right. That's about ownership.
Yeah.
You were going to add something, Paul.
Yeah, but she didn't do it alone. She got others to help her. And that's the key thing with all these entrepreneurs that we talk about. It's really about that team element. It's so important. So self-made millionaires and billionaires aren't self-made without other people.
And really definitely. Gotta have other people around for sure. And her story obviously ties in well to this chapter on ownership, because define the dream, right? Define the vision, whatever that is. As you said, Paul, it takes others. There's others she had to empower. And then to Rick's point, the entrepreneur journey, she had to implement, right? It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So those three elements in ownership, her story certainly defines. And when I think about ownership, one of the big challenges, and I struggle with this at times, and I know all of us do, but in my leadership coaching, I struggle with this. And Paul, this will resonate with you on something I've coached you around before. But what many leaders will often do is they'll wait on others. Like, they want something to happen, but then they kind of sit back and wait on others to go, or wait on others to cross the bay to, their island, Paul. You know what I'm talking about as I reference that, right? That we wait on others. And I think the key element in ownership, this idea of implementation, is as a leader, I've got to get in the boat and start paddling, and others then will follow, right? There's a quote that I learned from John Maxwell. I don't know where he got it, but leaders know the way, show the way, go the way, right? But I think going the way is probably the most important. Sometimes that's that lead by example. We've got to go the way instead of waiting for someone else to take ownership. I've got to start the action first. And then what that does, when we think about ownership, that gives others confidence. One of my favorite movies of all time is Braveheart. And, when you think about William Wallace, I was going to say Mel Gibson, but, Gibson played William Wallace. When you think about William Wallace, he went, right? He went the way, he acted, and he was kind of at the forefront, where when you look at the armies they were fighting, right, the leaders were kind of back behind the scenes, kind of watching and waiting and letting others go. And I think that's the real essence of ownership. Is, as a leader, sometimes you've got to step out first and lead others, and this creates action. And also, as leaders, you've got to be accountable. And so certainly, Rick mentioned a tool that I use earlier. I have a tool called the Daily Compass tool. I have a planner called the Daily Compass Quarterly Planner. And this is a daily action tool for me. I've got big goals as an entrepreneur. Rick, when I mentioned earlier, you hit me below the belt. I've got big dreams, but sometimes I wouldn't take action on those big dreams because they're so overwhelming, right? I'm like, what step do I take now? And so my Daily Compass tool it's a tool where I implement on 3 things a day, like 3 actions a day, 3 rocks a day. And it's really comes from a book called 4 Disciplines of Execution, where they did some research around this idea of implementation. People who have 1 to 3 goals will accomplish 1 to 3 goals. People who have 4 to 10 goals will accomplish 1 to 3 goals. People who have 10 or more goals will accomplish 0 of them. Because what happens is we're like that hummingbird. We're bouncing around all of these different places, never landing in one place, never getting to completion. As you said, Rick, I love that, what you brought to the table. And I was like, man, I was thinking about my diet journey. I know you and I are both on a diet journey right now, and a losing weight journey. I'm at that place, Rick, where that last 2% is going to take so much more effort, man. I've lost 25 plus pounds now, almost 30 pounds. I want to lose 15 to 20 more. And I'm at that place where it's going to take 98% more effort to lose that last little bit, to get to that last place, right? and I got to own that. It's nobody. I can blame my wife because she didn't buy the groceries I want, right? Or that would help me get there. Or I could blame because I'm so tired I don't want to go to the gym and do my activity. But I got to own that. And that's really, again, I could talk all day about ownership and those kind of things because I love this topic because I am a personal ownership, personal responsibility kind of guy. I've got to do it. You guys can't do it for me. You can believe in it for me, but you can't do it for me. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit, Paul, and dive into this cultivation idea. How do we cultivate ownership in others? Because for me as a leader, I got to own it, but it's also more important, as you said with Sarah Blakely, others had to help her do it. How do we cultivate this idea of ownership in others? Rick, let's begin with you.
Yeah, I want to dovetail on something you just said. One of my things that I hear often, you remember like when the pet rock came out, the guy made millions of dollars and it was basically a painted rock. And the biggest thing you would hear all the time is people are like, I had this idea. You ever have that friend? It's like, oh, I had this idea, blah, blah, blah. The difference, that person did it. The difference is you may have had the idea for the pet rock, but whoever it was that made $1 million off of selling rocks in a toy store is the person who actually implemented the solution. So all of the ideas and all of the thoughts and all of the grand things are just those until they're implemented. Right. We talked about the weight loss journey. And funny enough, I just hit a milestone. And again, I didn't call it a goal. Because the goal to me means it's over. You celebrate and you move on. To me, it was a milestone because it's a lifestyle change. But the funny thing about that is I had a specific weight for this milestone, and for the last 10 days, my weight stayed 2 pounds above it. Right? It was almost like, do you really want this last 2 pounds? I mean, are you really? And I was getting frustrated too. Right? I was working out harder, eating different, all that stuff, but I just hit that natural plateau, and it was like you have to push through that last little piece in order for it to really be implemented. Otherwise, at that point, I could have given up and just shot right back up, right? I mean, and there's so many people that get so close, which is the interesting point, right? Because what we end up doing is putting so much weight on the destination and not the journey that created to get there. And in my world, in project management, I watch this happen all the time. You've got this big dream, and then they involve a project manager and a team, and we plan it, and we come up with a date and a budget. And then the entire focus of everything becomes on the date and the budget. They lose sight of why we're doing that. They lose sight of the journey. They lose sight of why we're implementing this solution. And how many times has unintended consequences generated great benefit for society? I look at the space program and I was heartbroken when we weren't investing in that, because yes, we put a person on the moon, get somebody out to Mars, all these different things, the ingenuity and engineering and perseverance and how our daily lives changed because of the innovation required to get somebody to the moon, right? The microwave. How many people could survive without their microwave now, right? But that was generated through trying to figure out how are we going to feed these people when they get up to the moon. It's fascinating to me, all of these products that have come out of failing to implement whatever that original idea was, which means the journey itself is the most important. For me, it's not about hitting a number on the scale. It's about feeling better. It's about having more energy. It's about knowing that I've established a new routine that I'm going to be able to take and pivot to another facet of my life, right? This was a glaring thing to me. I created this accountability within myself and discipline within myself to go to the gym. Now that's a skill that I've learned that I can now translate to something else in my life, to be more balanced in this area of my life or be more balanced in this area of my life by utilizing that same pathway that I developed by going through the journey. So my whole point in cultivation is you got to go, you got to start, you got to do, but you also have to really understand what has changed, even if you don't hit that ultimate idea goal of what it is that you were shooting for.
Yeah, that's so good. Rick, when I moved, so I got out of the Army in 1998 and I moved to the town that I live in now. And when I moved here, there was about 1,200 people. There was one stoplight and there was not even a Walmart here. And I had this idea to open a gym, because at that time I was into fitness, man. I was coming out of the Army. I was in great shape. I've shown y'all one of my pictures before, I believe. I know I've shown Paul, when I was in fantastic shape. Almost look that good now again, Rick. No, I'm just kidding. But I was gonna open this gym, but I thought, there's not really enough people here to support it. Okay. It wasn't long after that, another guy opened a gym. The town I live in, that was 1,200 people when I moved here, is now over 20,000. It's one of the biggest communities in the state, fastest growing communities in the state. I mean, the landscape is, I was just talking to my brother-in-law about it yesterday. The landscape has completely changed. I mean, there's all kinds of restaurants, housing. You guys know I just sold my house. I mean, I literally sold my house in less than 24 hours, with multiple offers over what we listed it for. People are moving in here, but Rick, I didn't implement the idea. You keep hitting me below the belt today, man, on this. I can think of multiple times in my life where I've had this idea, but I was too afraid to take that step. Now, I'll be real honest with you. The last 10 years, especially, when I have an idea, I take action immediately. Like I may not fully implement the idea, but I take action on the idea immediately to get something going, because I've gotten tired of all the times in my life where I had a good idea and I didn't implement it, and someone else, because here's what I'm a believer in. I believe God gives multiple people that idea because he knows us as humans, right? Somebody's going to go multiply their talents, and someone is going to bury their talent. And for many, many years, I've buried my talent in opportunity that I could have taken forward. And look, again, this is a great discussion, maybe one of our better ones, but I don't want to digress too far. Paul, let's move into this idea of cultivating the ideas in others, because I think it is important. You gotta cultivate it within yourself, but what about others too?
Yeah, again, I shared that story on the front end, and it's so important because, to your point, guys, we can have ideas, the best ideas in the world. If we don't implement them, what good was that idea? Somebody else is going to run with it. We need a team. We need to get other people involved. I love Simon Sinek's quote on this. This is so powerful, guys. He says, "A leader's job is not to do the work for others. It is to help others figure out how to do it for themselves, to get things done, to succeed beyond what they thought was possible." And that's the mentality. And when you're building a team, that you're thinking through that. This is so important. It's not your job as a leader to do the work for others. You're trying to get other people involved, all right? Help them figure out how to implement it, but let them own it, implement it, encourage them to get things done. Look at Jaime Escalante, Stand and Deliver. By the way, I love the chorus. I was trying to look up the lyrics for that song. It is such a powerful song. If we can find a way to embed that in this podcast, we will.
Paul will sing it for us. You sing it for us, Paul.
Dude, you don't want me to sing, all right? But Richard Page of Mr. Mister delivers it for you, all right? He implements it. He sings it, all right? Stand and Deliver. He talks about, just really reaching in with your body and soul and going. It's a powerful lyric. It'll get you motivated for sure. But Escalante, think about what he did. He got on their turf as a leader, right? He was empathetic. He was proactive. All the other teachers were not. They're like, they just wanted to go home. They didn't care for what they were doing. Escalante saw something bigger. He saw a bigger picture. He painted a bigger picture. He took them to a bigger picture. That's what we get to do as leaders. That's what we get to do as entrepreneurs. And I just want to encourage you. This is so important. If you got part 1 and part 2, great. But if you don't do part 3, none of this matters. You got to implement.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't want to take too much more time, but in the book Breaking Average that Paul wrote, I co-authored the chapter on ownership. I give kind of 5 steps in the book to really cultivate this idea of ownership in others. I'm not going to dig too deep into those, but I'll line them out here in our discussion. Number 1 is you got to get a wind-up clock. And, I actually carry a wind-up clock around with me because it's an analogy of life. Oftentimes nowadays we use smartphones for our clock, so we don't have to reset it. But, in the old days, back when, Paul was a young boy. We had these things you had to wind up, and for it to keep time, you had to wind it up every single day. And when you think about ownership, it's an everyday thing. I can't just own it today and it continues to rock along tomorrow. So every day I've got to wind it up, whether it's ownership as a leader or getting your team to take that journey every single day as well. I'll share a quote in our tip and challenge portion that I love, but you've got to engage the team as well. That defining the dream, right? You got to engage the team in that, paint that picture. I can't remember if it was Rick or Paul a minute ago, but they didn't say it exactly this way, but it's really about what's the why behind it. Rick, I think you were talking about, the moon, going to the moon. What's the why behind it? When we lose vision of that why, then it's hard to continue to implement and get buy-in and cultivate this idea of ownership within others. So you've got to engage the team in the why. As leaders, take ultimate responsibility. Once you hand it off, it's still your responsibility. You can hand it off to a co-leader, a manager, a supervisor, whatever you want to call them in your business. But ultimately, as a leader, you got to have some check-in, not to come in and micromanage. We've talked about that in some of our past episodes, not to come in and micromanage, but to at least take ultimate responsibility to continue to push the team forward. And then next is involve them in the result. Like, what is the result and why is that result important? I love companies that share their financials. I love organizations that share their financials with the team, because when the team knows the result, because oftentimes I hear employees think that all the leaders are getting rich and we're just down here doing the work. And sometimes that's true. And look, owners and companies and CEOs, they should get paid more. I'm not saying that, but when we involve people in the kind of the results, what result are we driving? It helps cultivate that ownership as well. And then finally, celebrate the small victories. I think we have to learn to celebrate small victories. And I'm not very good at that because I continue to look at where I'm not versus where I am. Hey, as Rick and I were talking about earlier, I haven't reached my ultimate destination yet for my health journey. So sometimes I forget to look back and look at those little small victories. But as leaders, we've got to celebrate those small victories with our team, or they get bored or they get frustrated, because if all we're doing is coming in and just talking about where we're not at versus where we've been and how we've gotten there, we'll lose them, and it's harder to motivate them going further. Paul?
Yeah. So Mike, I mean, this is so important. I want to make sure that everybody, including myself, we're not missing this. All right. 5 steps that you just talked about. Those last 4, they all make sense. They're pretty intuitive, right? So let me just kind of walk through it, because I got a question for you. You say wind up clock. I'm going to come back to that one in a second. Engage the team. I get that. Take ultimate responsibility. I get that. Involve others in the result. Absolutely. So critical. And 5, celebrate small victories. Yes. Enjoy the journey along the way, as Rick was talking about. But I'm not sure everybody, and I understand wind up clock because you've coached me through this. But I think this is so significant. I want you to go back and I want you to share real briefly again, what does that mean, wind up clock? Because that's a metaphor, obviously. What does it mean for our listeners? How should they use a wind-up clock?
Yeah, it's every day, right? I have a tool called the Daily Compass tool. I've mentioned this a couple times. Yep. Every day, I've got to have something to generate what I'm going to do. Paul, you use a Scrum board. I know. I use a tool called the Daily Compass tool. So every day, I've got mine right here in front of me. Every day, what I do to wind my clock up is I kind of start with a purpose, like what is today going to be about? How am I going to lead? How am I going to communicate? How am I going to, lead myself, lead my team, communicate with my team, motivate my team? So I'm starting with this purpose every single day. So the idea of winding the clock up is every day I've got to wind my motivation up, right? Wind my purpose up, wind my vision up. And then what I have to do next is I've got to lay out kind of what are my coordinates. I use the Daily Compass as you said, a metaphor. Today we use a GPS. We plug in our coordinates, right? Where are we going to go today? Where am I at? Where do I want to end up? I plug in my coordinates. So in my daily compass tool, or this idea of winding up clock, where am I going? When I finish today, how do I want to end it? What do I want to have to accomplish? And Paul, these are just two things I want to do every single day. If I don't do that, and look, I coach hundreds of leaders a year. I've coached thousands of leaders over the years. I would say 98% of people do not do this. What they do is they come to work and they do the same thing today as they did yesterday. They look at their email, they check their voicemail, they look at their calendar and say, okay, what is someone else going to tell me to do today? Versus owning it and saying, what am I going to accomplish today? What am I going to get done today? You guys, I know, that I do this really well because I'm kind of, I'm type A. I get frustrated when someone messes with my schedule, right? Because I'm very rigid in making sure that I'm getting done what I need to get done. And that's the whole idea of the daily compass tool or the wind up clock metaphor, Paul, is every day. I have to do that every day. I can't just say, okay, this is what I want to get done this year. Because most people wake up, 30 days after the 1st of January and they've already lost because they haven't implemented this idea of the daily wind up clock.
Yeah. And the point here, guys, is be intentional. What Mike's talking about is you've got to be intentional every single day, right? So when you're intentional, then you put it right in front of you. You've prompted yourself, right? Rick and I are going through a book, BJ Fogg's The Tiny Habits book, and we're talked about behavior. Behavior is tied to three things, guys. It's tied to our motivation, our ability, and our prompt. We got to have those three things for behavior to happen. What Mike's talking about is, hey, look, prompt yourself. Wind that clock. Be intentional. Put down the things that you want to get done that day and do that every day. Rick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because this is so important, right? Because this mindset, I think, is critical to success.
Yeah, I enjoy the wind the clock piece as well, and everybody. What I love about the different planners and the different ideas and the different prompts is that everybody's a little bit different, right? So, one of the things I love about Mike's planners is the behind the scenes of it, in the sense of, well, there's a million planners out there. Why would Mike put a planner out, right? That would stop an entrepreneur right there. Somebody else has already had the idea. Well, but they haven't implemented it the way Mike has. And you might look at Mike's planner and go, yeah, that doesn't hit the mark for me. And that's okay. But there's so many people that think the way Mike thinks and thinks, that need that additional driver, that it's going to help a tremendous amount of people. So that didn't allow Mike to stop. I was laughing earlier. You were talking about a ton of ideas, Mike. And if you look at my GoDaddy account, it's just the Boulevard of Broken Dreams, right? It's the first thing I do. The first thing I do when I have an idea is I go secure a domain for it. And I literally hundreds of domains, and I could tell you every single one of the ideas that I hadn't implemented. But it's just my Boulevard of Broken Dreams. But I revisit that because it's funny, but it's also kind of a tickler that I had an idea, but maybe I wasn't ready to implement it yet. Maybe I wasn't in the headspace to do it just yet, or is it still a good idea? And if it is, maybe I should pick that back up and run with it. But yeah, my Boulevard of Broken Dreams is my GoDaddy account, just so you know. But implementation is everything. Otherwise, it's just an idea.
Yeah. It's funny, Rick, I've got that same Boulevard, man. I've got probably about 100 domains, man, some really good ones. So we should compare our notes here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick's been really tough on me today, man, just the things he's talking about, because I too, I have that Rolodex or Boulevard of domains. Yeah, that's a great idea. I want to capture that before someone else does. But you did mention, the Daily Compass quarterly planner, Rick. That's an idea that I finally implemented, right? Because I've had that idea for probably 3 or 4 years, and I finally implemented it. Like, I've been using the tool, but I actually created the planner in 2020, rolled it out by the end of 2020 for the beginning of 2021. But it was an idea that I finally implemented. I said, and because what I was trying to do a lot of, and maybe you guys struggle with this too, is I was trying to get it perfect before I created it, right? It's not perfect. And I love what you said, Rick. It may not work for you. It works for me. It works for a lot of people I coach, but it's not perfect. And I'll have a version 2 out before the end of this year. That'll, because as soon as I put it in my hands, right, I created it, we got it published. As soon as I had it in my hands, I'm like, I got to do this different. I had 3 or 4 more ideas of things I wanted to change. Right. And that's the essence of implementation. I always go back to the Edison quote. I have not failed 10,000 times. I've simply learned 10,000 ways that didn't work. And all of the things he invented because of his implementation of an idea to try to find, something that worked as well. So Paul, let's move in. We got to get this wrapped up. This may be like a 4-hour podcast if we don't get to where we want to get to, the tip and challenge portion of our show.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have such a passion. We want to help people as best we can, and we're so passionate about this message, guys, because we want you to go forward with your ideas. You don't have to have it perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about excellence, and excellence is in the doing. It's in the executing. So I love Alan Mullally's quote. I think you shared this with me, Mike, maybe when we were collaborating on the chapter. Leadership is having a compelling vision, a comprehensive plan, relentless implementation, and talented people working together. I love that thought, right? And here he is. He's working in this, I think at the time of that quote, in the automotive industry. He came from the aircraft industry. But it's such a really powerful thought, right? It's having compelling vision. We talked about vision a couple of weeks ago. A comprehensive plan. We're talking about daily planning. Relentless implementation. That means you're executing that plan. And in talented people working together. Don't forget that part, guys. Don't go solo on this, all right? Plan the work the plan, but include other people with you. And my challenge is this: plan your work for today. All right, download. We'll put a link for Mike's stuff, but we'll give you whatever tools you want because we so much believe in this thing. Be intentional about it. Plan your work for today and every day, then work your plan. All right. That's how you measure what matters. That's my challenge. That's
good. I love that quote from Alan Mulally. As you were talking about that, Paul, I actually looked over on my bookshelf to remember the name of the book. I was thinking it was Icon, but it's American Icon. It was actually kind of a biography about Mulally and the rise of Ford, when he took over. And I think that quote came from the book American Icon. If you haven't read that book, it's a fantastic book about, how he came in and restored Ford to its greatness as a company, because they were struggling, right? They were like on the brink of bankruptcy. I'm pretty sure Ford is the only motor company that did not take a government stimulus package or whatever back in the early 2000s during the financial crisis. I think Ford is the only company that did not do that. And that was due to Mullally's leadership and his ownership in driving that company forward. So I love that you brought that quote back to the forefront of my mind as well. My tip and challenge, Paul, is what I always say is I love this quote. Do every job you're in like you're going to do it for the rest of your life, and then demonstrate that ownership of it. That's a quote by Mary Barra. Rick, I have no idea who that is, so you can kind of bust my chaps over that. But I just love that.
The others.
Yeah, I love the quote. Do every job like you're in it. I talk about this when I go to hospitals. Nothing pains me more that when I'm walking, I'm driving up in a hospital parking lot, and I watch these healthcare workers, these nurses walk in, and they're walking by trash in the parking lot. And some of them say, well, that's not my job. I'm here to take care of patients. That's environmental services job, or that's housekeeping's job. No, this is your house. Clean it like it's yours, right? Do every job like it's yours. Sure. Maybe it's someone else's job to pick up the trash, but this is your house, right? I often have that conversation with my kids, by the way. I just had that last night in my home. Hey, this is my house. And treat it like it's my house. Don't, and your mother is not someone who's going to pick up all your stuff. You don't pick your stuff up yourself. We had that conversation last night, but do every job like you own it. And then my challenge, Paul, we've talked about this a lot. get a wind-up clock. Every day, reset the vision and create accountability for yourself and for your team. And Zig Ziglar said, people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. That's the challenge. Every day, you got to own it. You got to own it. It's an everyday battle.
All right. Well, it's been fantastic. I love the tip and challenge that we have today. Get that daily clock. All right. Wind it up. Reset the vision. Create accountability. Find other people too. Don't go solo on this, guys. All right. Love that. I want to thank our sponsor today, Mike Harbor Resources. And certainly we've highlighted his great resource, the Daily Compass. What a great planner that is. We also invite you to go to breakingaverage.com. We've got some other resources for you as well. We want to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. What leaders are out there that we should interview and talk to? Who has taken this idea of intentionality and really implemented? We want to hear their stories. We love to hear how they've impacted other people, how they've created team strong leadership. So fantastic. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, great show today, Paul. Rick, always enjoy being with you. This is I love this conversation. I thought it was one of our better ones. A great topic again on the Breaking Average podcast. I hope you'll continue to join us if you're listening live on the Empowered Living Show. Thanks for joining us. If you're listening to the recording on the Breaking Average podcast, make sure you leave us a review. Look, that helps us continue to grow. And if there's things you want to hear us discuss, talk about, help you grow in, make sure you send us a message. Let us know what those ideas are for you. Paul, Rick, always a pleasure being with you. Join us again on the next episode of the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.